Friends, to remind you of what happened in Delhi 6 years ago. I would like to go a little bit into the background of this perfectly horrible experience that was inflicted on Delhi, to see the context in which it happened. Also, the consequences of Delhi 2020 are still there. They are not over. There are people, young people, in prison. There is no clear government narrative or acceptable government narrative in the public domain as to what caused this. Let us go back a little. I think it all started with the experience of Assam on the implementation of the NRC. And this had remained not very well known outside Assam, but was brought home to a much larger audience by a people's tribunal organized in early September 2019. I happened to be there and was anguished by the tales of torture, of inhuman treatment inflicted on many Indian citizens in Assam. There were numerous instances of families being divided, being imprisoned, having to travel long distances repeatedly in order to establish their citizenship. And such was the implementation that any individual who you have never met could tell the administration that you were a Ghuspatia. And that was enough for you to be picked up, despite your having proved your bona fides. That was enough for you to be picked up again and put into a detention center. Now, what complicated the Assam experience also was a concerted move by the government that the NRC and All India NRC would help to determine who all were the foreigners, the termites in our society, and to have them evicted. Naturally, the intention was obvious and created great anguish in the Muslim community all over India, because this was to be held as a sword of Damocles on them to be applied at any point of time. And as a sop to the majority community, there was the CAA. The bill of the CAA was passed in, I recall that there was I mentioned already the public tribunal in early September. And the members of the jury of that tribunal had commented, had determined that citizenship was a fundamental right and that people could not be asked to prove their citizenship. It was for the government to prove that they were not citizens. The whole thing had been turned upside down. Following the passage of the CAA bill in Parliament in the second week of December, there were widespread disturbances, protests all over India, notably in Shaheen Bagh. I had occasion to visit Shaheen Bagh a few times during that period and was deeply impressed by those who had participated. I will always remember the lady with her head and her face half covered, saying with angry eyes that we do not care what the Mard or the Maulvi have to say. We are here to assert our rights as citizens. I'd written at the time that the women of Shaheen Bagh have shown a commitment to the flag, to the Indian flag, the Indian national anthem, and to the Indian Constitution, which was at that time not very commonly found elsewhere. The Delhi riots started on the 23rd of February, that is 2 months after Shaheen Bagh. In between, the government's intentions had been amply demonstrated by the attacks on Jamia and the JNU. But what became very prevalent at this time was hate speech. From a neighboring state, we had a call, "Boli nahi manenge, to fir boli nahi manenge, to fir goli marenge." And of course, that from a ministerial platform in Delhi, which became the rallying cry of the pro-CAA protesters, was in Saloko, etc. Now it is curious that when a judge demanded of the police if an FIR had been lodged in the face of this very egregious provocation, he was transferred the next day out of Delhi. And on another occasion, the Solicitor General of India told the court that the time is not yet ripe for filing an FIR. Ladies and gentlemen, in 6 years, that time has not been found appropriate. Now, from our group, we visited the riot-affected areas in early March. We wrote to the President, and when there was no action visible, we requested some eminent personalities to form a citizens' committee to look into the Delhi riots. And the chairman of the committee, Justice Madan Lokur, is with us here today. Now, several reports had appeared at the time, those by the CPM, an initiative of lawyers and citizens, and one of Delhi Minorities Commission. But one thing which they had in common was the conclusion that the police had not discharged their duties. In fact, there was clear evidence of complicity. Six years down the line, friends, there are still young people in prison. And as one committee pointed out, the use of UAPA for these alleged crimes was not a legal procedure, but a travesty of the law. I do not know where we go from here. As a citizen, I'm dismayed that no action has been taken as yet after the very public hate speech committed by the chief minister of an eastern state. We have to see how that goes from here. But today, if we have to ask ourselves as to why we are meeting, to recall the rights, the communal rights of 2020, I think we have to remember that this is to show our support for those who are still in prison, for those who have shown exceptional courage, like somebody getting a judge to compel the police to permit injured citizens to be taken to the hospital at midnight on the 23rd February. And also, perhaps above all, as a tribute to the women of Shaheen Bagh who had shown such exemplary courage to, in the face of all odds, to fight for their justice and with their faith in the Constitution of India. As yet, there is not known to be any adequate compensation for the victims of the riots. And we hope that the civil society would be able, in the days to come, to make an impression on this. Of course, above all, the responsibility has to be that of the political parties, and one can only hope that they will discharge their responsibility in creating public opinion against injustice which has been and continues to be inflicted. Thank you.